everyone. We're grateful to have you here. This is our annual College of Humanities Honored Alumni Lecture. We're really pleased today to have an alumni from the Department of Philosophy. His name is Dave Elkington, and I will read his biography, and then we'll let him sit on the chair and give his lecture. And I'm sure he'll entertain questions at the end.
Throughout. We'll talk
Throughout.
about
Okay,
the
excellent.
context.
That's great. Dave Elkington graduated with a bachelor's degree in 1999 in philosophy. His minors were in Japanese, Hebrew, and business. He's highly active in the business community. He founded InsideSales.com to revolutionize the sales industry by empowering sales with intelligent tools, insights, and technology. Recently, he founded Elkington Electric, an electric vehicle automaker and automotive technology company. Dave's also a founder and board member of Silicon Slopes and a member of Utah Tech University's Board of Trustees down in St. George. Additionally, he teaches entrepreneurship at and sits on computer science and CBLC advisory boards at BYU. He's an active investor, advisor, and board member of several other technology and healthcare startups. Dave was recognized as Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year, AAISP's 25 Most Influential Inside Sales Professionals, and Utah Business Magazine's Top 40 Under 40. He has authored articles in several influential magazines and appeared on various TV networks. He's from Utah and is married with 2 children, one of whom is with us this day, and his name is Henry. So, Dave? That's it.
You should wait to clap until I'm done because you don't know.
Okay, so I have notes in case we get lost. I may use these, I may not. So this will happen in one of 2 ways. One, I'm going to lecture for the next hour, and I've been informed by my family that that's not good. So the other option is you ask questions. This is interactive, and ask questions throughout the conversation. And so let's make this more of a dialogue versus me telling you stuff. But it's up to you. So this is, like I said, this can happen either way. So there's 2 axioms that I want to kind of start the conversation with. So two principles that if you don't agree with them, you should probably leave, because if you don't like, and I think you will, these are both obvious. So the first one is kind of axiom number 1, we're supposed to live a rich and meaningful life. The pursuit of our life should be to live very meaningful, very rich lives. 2 Nephi 25, since I'm in BYU, I can use scriptures also. So men are that they might have joy. Like, that's one of the reasons we exist. The second reason, and this one's again an obvious one from a Christian point of view, it says basically we now need to help everyone else experience that also. Right? So those are the 2 kind of core axioms. And I can share 1,000 scriptures that basically tell you to do that. Okay, with that, I'm going to kind of, I don't know that I need notes here. So, like Western society, I'm going to propose is kind of broken right now. And it's really broken. And it's not because of COVID. I think most people are like, oh, well, it's broken most obviously because of COVID, and that's actually not the case. There is a decline, there's a drought of innovation in Western society right now. And most people don't realize that it's happening, but if you read The Economist, it's all over the place. And largely the attribution of that drought is because of, they're saying, monopolistic behavior. Right, you guys tracking with me? By the way, if anyone disagrees, please challenge me. I'm probably right, but I want to hear what you're thinking. That wasn't a joke. Okay, so like The Economist is like monopolistic behavior. So you've got like Microsoft has gotten really big. You have these tech companies who've become too big, and so they don't allow small companies to emerge and create disruptions. So the theme today is how humanities is, I don't remember what I said, but basically is leading disruptive thinking, is leading disruptive thought. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you the punchline, and then we're going to wander our way through this. I assume everyone in here has studied, has some affinity towards humanities. Is anyone not? Because I'm going to be kind of unabashed and be a little bit maybe even offensive to non-humanities folks. But I think I'm in a target-rich environment, so I think we're okay. So the problem, and it came, I learned this through my experience. So I'm going to use a little bit of my career path to describe what I discovered is really wrong. And so as I graduated with a degree in philosophy, Scott mentioned. And in fact, I studied, I don't know if you remember me, I took a class from you, I think, if you're who I think you are. Maybe not. What's your name?
Angela Falconer?
I took a class from you. Do you remember?
No.
I'm sure you don't. You were a grad student, I think just temporarily visiting. You were so hard. I think I got an A, but I think I worked my tail off to get an A from you. It was on Plato, and you had us read the Republic. It was a fantastic class. It was a summer class, but I have cursed you many times. So I graduated, and I recognized you. I had to bring it up. A little bit of whatever. One day, you can do that too. She was amazing, by the way. Angela was absolutely very inspiring. So thank you for what you did. And I was very nostalgic. I had a tour, very nostalgic of what you guys have here. It was not as nice as it is now. So I graduated in '99, and my friend was like, "What are you going to do when you graduate?" And he was an econ major, and I'm like, "Well, I'll just go look at the philosophy firms. I'm sure they're hiring." They're not, actually, not for several thousand years. So I went into investment banking, which is the next obvious logical step. And so there's a lot of students in here. A humanities degree will prepare you to do anything you want. So they were pushing me very aggressively into either academia, so to go to be a professor, or into law, or into medicine. And I'm like, but those don't seem fun. Those are not interesting. And so one of the things I want you guys to get out of this is, if you're a humanities major, what do you learn? What are you learning here? You're learning humans. You're learning how humans think. You're learning, which if you understand that, you can literally do anything you want. So I personally prefer to hire. I've hired thousands of people through my career, thousands of people. I love humanities majors. I love them. They're so much more adept. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about where I think you should go. So I graduated, I moved to New York. I worked in investment banking for a couple of years. And just one kind of interesting experience in investment banking, I took, I was at the very bottom, right? Because I frankly didn't belong there, but I kind of talked my way into it. So that's one thing as a humanities major. You should be able to talk your way into about anything you want. And if not, hone those skills. So we took Krispy Kreme public, which is amazing, right? I ate a lot of donuts in that period of my life. We raised a bunch of money for a company called Carver's. They have their steakhouse. Due diligence on that company was awesome. But this was in '99, so think .com kind of boom and then crash. And so we also raised $50 million for a company called Incentives. I'm assuming no one here knows what that company is. You shouldn't. This is insane. So they had done about $750,000 in the last 12 months of revenue, which is not a lot for a company. We valued them at $200 million, and we took them public on the Swiss stock exchange. That company had no right to be public, nor did they have any right to be valued at $200 million, nor should they have had $50 million in cash to grow that business. They were an online coupon company. That's what these guys did. And so at this point, I was kind of like, I guess this is it. This is reality. This is interesting. I'm like, and they're not that smart. So I'm already beginning to think I'm smarter than these people, which again, I'm humanities, so you guys understand that. And I'm like, okay. So then I left and I went into venture, and I experienced another kind of weird phenomenon. We invested in lots of different startups. We would put anywhere from $3 to $30 million into companies. We kind of help them, grow and curate their business. And so one thing I noticed was there was this like cave for developers and all of these, like programmers and all of these companies. So, and you know, we would stuff Cheetos and Mountain Dew under the door, and then this like magical technology would emerge. And I would like hear ping pong once in a while. I'm like, okay, how does ping pong, you know, create technology? But it did apparently. And so it frustrated me enough. I'm like, again, humanities major, they're not that smart. It can't be that difficult. So I went back I came back here to get a master's in computer science. I'm like, I'm going to figure this stuff out. Clearly they're creating value in my mind. These companies are creating value in society that's getting valued very highly, but it doesn't look that hard. So I then came back to BYU, didn't finish the master's degree. Like any good entrepreneur, I dropped out. Though your professor's going to be like, don't listen to that part. And started a company called InsideSales.com. I raised, yeah?
So computer science wasn't that hard?
It actually is not that hard. Anyone here speak another language? It's the same thing. Programming is literally just another language. It's really not difficult. If you're good at math, or if you're good at sciences, or if you're good at languages, like I learned, and it's not difficult. In fact, I'm looking at the camera, do not repeat this. It's a trade. If you know how to work on cars, computer science is the same thing. It's learning a set of rules and techniques to be able to manipulate things. So it's very simple, actually. If you have that kind of mindset. Yeah.
And is part of your claim that humanities is different than that in a fundamental way? And
Yes.
that humanities gives you tools that things like computer science or like
Business.
or other things that they don't give you quite what humanities does?
It is absolutely different. And it's, I think, critical for society, and we're going to talk about that. So I start the company, I raise $350 million in venture money. We grow it, we have several thousand employees working for us, and ultimately I sell it to a private equity firm and decide, I'm going to leave. Now, in that process, though, the first 8 years, I did that for 15 years. For the first 8 years, we bootstrapped it, which means we didn't raise any venture money, so we just built it. And we were profitable. So if you guys have read Clayton Christensen, he's a great author here. He has one book called The Innovator's Dilemma. A second book he wrote, which I think is actually his better book, is How You Measure Your Life. And in that book, it's really, if you haven't read that, it's actually worth a read. At least Audible, come on. And so he says in the book, a successful company, the most successful companies are profitable, which is not the case in the tech community. So I'm going to bring you guys into the evil empire of business. And I know many of you in this room think business is being a sellout. I'm going to tell you it is not. In fact, it is your responsibility to come and get involved in innovation in business. And I know this is like a betrayal of which you feel near to your heart. And again, by the end of this, you're going to think I'm nuts. Well, you'll agree with me or disagree with me. So it's not an or, by the way, on that. So after 9 years, everyone in the business community did say, like, you should raise money. That's how you scale a business. By this point, we were doing about 12 million in revenue, which is that's a good-sized business for technology. Like, it's kind of awesome. Like, that's like kind of cool. We raised money. We raised $4 million on a $30 million valuation. So they said, your company's worth $30 million. Here's $4 million. And I'm like, okay, I've done it. I've now raised venture money. I am successful. And so we do it. We then, one of these guys joins my board, and he says to me, okay, spend all that money in the next 12 months and double your company. And to me, I'm just like, okay, spend all that money. How do you spend $4 million in 1 year? I think I can figure out how to double the company, but man, that feels aggressive, but we do it. And so, because I'm like, these are the smart guys, like they must know something I don't know. They're the finance people. So I double the business, he says, now go raise money again. We're valued, and we're doing about 24, 25 million, so we more or less double the business. And he's like, okay, let's go raise money again. New venture firm comes in and says, okay, we'll value you now at $200 million. So we went from 30 million in value to 200 million in 12 months. And I was like, wow. And we raised 35 million roughly. And I was like, okay, like, dude, I'm winning. Like, this is working. I'm being successful. We do it again, and I raise 100 million the next time. And you can see this just goes on and on and on. So what I didn't realize, as soon as they came in, they said, all right, come and introduce your product, and it was a technology tool, I'll explain it in a minute. Come and introduce your product to all of our other portfolio companies. And that's a company that they've also invested in. So every venture firm has 30 or 50 or 20 of these companies that they've also invested in. So, okay, come bring this tool and give it, sell it to these other companies we've invested in. And then you should buy their products too. Now you see some of the problem here. It kind of starts to feel a little like a Ponzi scheme, right? It's like, okay, well, we're trading money and it's all your money and we're doubling, but are we really doubling? Because we're just selling tools and we're buying their tools. And I'm like, but we're doubling and this is what people do. So I'm like, this is cool. Like, I think I'm winning, but at this point, just like when I saw in investment banking, this incentives company, I'm like, this doesn't seem right. And then, like, there's just this pattern of like, something doesn't feel right. So we grow the business, and this happened over and over, several times, again, to where I raised $350 million. Sold the business, then I was like, okay, I think I won. Like, this feels right to me, like, kind of, but not really. So I take a break, I'm hanging out with my family. I've got two kids, married, and by the way, half of my family, it's spring break actually, so my wife and daughter are at Disney World, which is awesome because during October, they do they turn all the rides into like spook alleys and Halloween things, which is better than this version of the Mickey Mouse room. Like, somehow I think I had and they won. So I get to be with you guys, so really, I won. None of you believe that, but I'm going to say it. Okay, so now COVID happens. So this is like right before COVID, I sold my business. Again, I'm hanging out at home, we're kind of quarantined, and this is like February of like 2020, right? You guys are tracking timeline with it. All of you now are caught up. Governor Herbert, who's a friend of mine, because again, I helped start this association called Silicon Slopes, where we like all of the tech companies are kind of involved together. So he reaches out to me and says, can you or any of the Silicon Slopes CEOs help us get more COVID testing? Because we're really struggling. And if you guys remember, it was like Hunger Games for like COVID. So like it's like what states can win and what states will lose. And so, and at the same time, I'm also friends with some of the people in church leadership where we were having a hard time getting missionaries home. Remember this like moment of time where it's like we can't get missionaries home because we can't get them tested. We don't have testing in place. And so Governor Herbert reaches out to me and says, can you help with these problems? And I'm kind of like, any humanities, like, yeah, sure, it can't be that hard. Like, this shouldn't be that difficult. So I'm like, yeah. So I call some of the other guys. I'm like, it turns out it's actually kind of hard. But as we started talking, there was a company here in Utah called Co-Diagnostics, and it turns out a Utah-based company has a COVID test that they're selling all over the world, just not here in Utah. I'm like, all right, check, I got that. There was another company here in Utah who was based out of China, and they set up a lab in here, because they also have a big warehouse here, where they set up their own COVID testing lab to test their employees, to get their own employees back to work. I'm like, okay, let me buy that from you. So I bought it from him, and we set up what was called Test Utah. Some of you guys will be familiar with it. And we went from like 800 tests a day to like, I think it was like 2,500 tests a day. And the difference between, well, we'll come back to this. I was like, okay, that's cool. All right, here you go. And he's like, actually, will you just run this for us? And it's like, I just got out of business. Like, I'm not trying to get back into this stuff. Like, no. And he's like, we really need this. So a friend of mine set up a company. I'm like, okay, let's roll this into your company. It's called Know Me Health. And so we set that up in there. And then, sure enough, I get a call from Governor Reynolds in Iowa. which is kind of cool, right? It's like a governor's calling me, and she said, hey, Governor Herbert referred us over to you, like, can you do this for Iowa? And I'm like, sure. And then she refers us to Governor Ricketts in Nebraska, and same, like, rinse and repeat, like, same thing. And then also DeSantis in Florida, and Abbott in Texas, and Hawaii, and Colorado. And before you know it, like, we were doing 150,000 COVID tests a day at the peak. That's kind of interesting, and I was having a blast, right? Like, think about that number. Now, as I built Inside Sales, we only got to about just about 100 million in revenue over 15 years. Like, it was cool. And let me tell you what we built in Inside Sales. So as the first 8 years, when I went back to get the master's in computer science, which again I failed at, I really loved AI, like machine learning, and using things called neural nets to try and automate stuff. So the problem we were solving was, pardon me. The problem we were solving was, how do we get salespeople to be less annoying? Which clearly I have not entirely solved yet. Pardon me, guys. And so what we basically did is we looked at all of the data, online data, like when we buy stuff, when we do stuff, we're saying so much without it saying anything. So we took all that data, and we basically then gave it to a sales rep and said, okay, this person is most likely going to buy from you, this person is not going to buy from you. Don't waste your time with this person, don't annoy them. And we even say, here's how this person would rather buy from you in this way. So it was very prescriptive and like kind of helping coach through the sales process. And the first 8 years we were growing, like we grew like crazy, and we continued to obviously grow. But it took us 15 years to get to $15 million, or about $100 million. Know Me Health, in about 2 years, went to about $3 billion in sales. So what was the difference? And that's kind of what I want to talk a little bit about. Like, how did I build, how did we, it's not, you guys know, like when I say I, there's an armada of people we had. Know Me Health had almost 3,000 nurses. We had, oh goodness sakes, I mean, hundreds of doctors. Like, it was a massive organization. But the problem, so let me ask you a question. What problem do you guys think we were solving with Know Me Health, with the COVID stuff? So any business has to solve a problem, right? So what problem were we solving at Know Me Health?
Access to vaccines.
Okay. I'm going to say no, but it's a good guess.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good guess. I respect you, second personality.
Scale.
What is it?
Scale.
No. It's good. Like, there's no wrong answer, right? Like, who knows? Like, I'm sure it's some of everything, but kudos for even saying something. We were solving, we were allowing, the problem we were solving is connectivity. So we allowed people, grandmas, to spend time with their grandchildren. We were allowing people to travel. We were allowing people to be mobile. Like, the most foundation, and maybe this is what you guys meant, right? Let's say this is what you guys meant. We were solving the problem of human connection, and what's the demand for human connection in the world? Pretty big, actually, right? Had we been able to hire nurses faster, had we been able to scale faster, I think we could have built a $10 billion business. Like, there was no cap to what we could build, because we were, like, think about it, parents, we were allowed missionaries to come home. Like, this is a foundational human need. Whereas the first time I was building something I thought was interesting, and look, having salespeople that are annoying and getting them away from us, like, that's a pretty good need, but it's not like the second one, right? So the question is, why, and we did not raise any venture money. This was all, wildly profitable, which is, again, for obvious reasons. So what's the difference between the two? And the answer comes down to, there's three things needed to create innovation in the world. One, you have to know a problem, right? You have to be able to understand what the need is. Number two, you have to have the tools to the infrastructure to then be able to solve that problem. And 3, you have to have the funding, basically. Oh, excuse me, let me just remember this. Oh, you have to have the technology. So I'm going to use Henry Ford. He's a little nutty, but he was brilliant. If anybody read his autobiography, if not, that's another book you should read. It's fascinating. So what problem was Henry Ford solving with the vehicle when he made his first car? It's a real question.
Transportation.
Transportation. No, that was not the problem he was solving. Any other guesses?
Didn't he streamline, like he made vehicles faster?
So yes, but that wasn't the problem he was solving. That's how he did it, and he was brilliant at it.
Manufacturing through the assembly line?
Again, that's his solution. So again, you need problem, tech, money, basically. So those are both kind of tech. We'll call it innovation.
Is it connectivity or saving time?
Yes, actually. Well, you had a thought.
Well, I was just gonna say it's about availability. Automobiles existed, but they weren't available for ordinary, you're making them accessible to ordinary people.
So you're both kind of right. The problem was people were stuck on farms, and farms were really far from the town. So the alternative to, you basically had, everybody on their farm had a horse, and they had a wagon. The problem is that the horse was always being used to pull the plow. So you can't really go into town, but maybe once a week to go get food. And so similarly, it created isolation. So basically people were alone on their farms pretty much always. And so, and this was a problem he personally experienced. He was like, his dad made him, he didn't love working the farm. His dad had a machine shop, so he to work on tools and things like that. So this steam car came into town, and he was like, this is crazy, this is amazing. He's like, if we could make this cheap enough and available enough, people wouldn't have to walk to town, because that's the only way. The alternative was walking to town. So his competition was walking. And it doesn't take a lot of walking to realize that people don't love walking a lot. Like, it gets exhausting. So what he solved was actually ultimately human connectivity. It allowed us to go be around other people more and to get into town more. And he knew it. He was brilliant because he knew that was the problem he was solving. And so that was his problem. As some of you said, what was his innovation? And he used new technology. So he looked at the steam capability, and he's like, okay, that's too cumbersome. Like, building a steam engine is dangerous because it can blow up, and it's very costly and very cumbersome. So he went to his dad's machine shop where he figured out how to, he's always building tools and fixing tools and things like that. He's like, I'm going to try this gas engine thing that they're doing. And so he built his own gas engine. And sure enough, he basically innovated the modern automotive industry. So the question I have for this group is, who is most capable to identify the most foundational problems in society?
I think he'd say people who study humanities.
Yes. It was a softball. You're exactly right.
I don't know that I.
But why? You don't agree though.
Maybe not.
Okay, let's go after it. You have a thought back here.
The people that study humanities are studying how people think, like you said earlier. So we understand like the human condition when people are focused on.
100%.
Well, just noticing it, like there's a difference between like if I'm programming and I already have the problem in mind, but being able to notice what the problems are and what people are worried about takes a different sort of paying attention.
Totally. So you are, in humanities, your job is to study humans. And if you want to understand a problem, you have to understand the context of that problem. You can't come up with some solution if you don't actually understand the context to that area. So the problem today, so let's go back to the venture space. Why is it so broken? And I actually think the finance industry is basically eroding away innovation. You erode innovation, what's going to happen to the world? Our economy is going to decline. I think we're at a junction in society where things are going to either go really good, and I'll explain that scenario, And I think alternatively, I actually think we're on the verge potentially of a significant crash, both economically and even societally. I think we're at this weird junction point, but there's an opportunity, and I believe you and people in humanities have the responsibility to help us take the right turn versus the wrong turn. And again, I'm not being pedantic. I actually think we're really in this weird, I mean, I think we all feel it, right? We're like, okay, is it inflation? Is it because of politics? Is it because of COVID? Like, we all feel this weird moment in history we're at right now, I assume. We have the rate of innovation, again, there's lots of research, if like, I could bore you with stats. The rate of innovation has actually declined globally over the last 10 years, very notably. So, so let's talk, let me grab, make sure. I've got some, I think, interesting stories. I want to make sure I don't miss them. And you'll get a little older and you'll have to hold your paper away from you. So here's the deal. Humans are cyclical, like, meaning the problems we experience are the same problems we've experienced for thousands of years, right? So give me some examples of like common problems. Again, pride cycle, obviously, that's one that, again, this group, we can have that conversation. But the problems humans experience are the same problems we've experienced 200 years ago, 400 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. And so as you study people, like, so maybe we have some history folks in here, we have some philosophy folks in here, we probably have some language folks in here. As you study the history, you actually know, you guys know the problems humans are going to run into. Like, you know them already. So there's this concept called arbitrage, where you take an idea from the past or from some other industry and you arbitrage it to a new industry. So if you have, again, you are most equipped in society to know the problems that we're going to run into, because we just keep doing it. We're just stupid. We keep doing it again and again.
Well, I don't want to.
Yep, challenge.
Oh, well, I was just going to say this isn't where you want to take the conversation in no words, but I'm kind of curious what tips you have, assuming humanities majors are equipped to find problems which are to be solved, and that is what makes a good business. What tips would you have in engaging with that sphere of the world and escaping maybe like ethical dilemmas and climbing the capitalism
Yes,
ladder?
that's actually exactly where I want to go. In fact, let's just go there.
Ditto that question.
What's that?
Ditto.
Ditto? Okay.
Also, something I'm curious about. Sure, I'm a humanities major, but how do I
What do you do? Yeah, what do you do?
How do I not go, well, I do want to go into academia, but it's also like, no one's walking to me like, hey, you're a humanities major, can you come help us find more problems to solve? Like, if someone came up with me.
Let's talk about that a little bit. So what was wrong with the venture guys? And I'm gonna actually say, I don't think they're wrong. What's the job of the finance industry? Banking, venture, private equity, hedge funds, what's their job?
Make money.
Make money, no, that's what they want to do, but what's their job to society? That's what they get out of it.
Grow innovation?
Maybe, yeah.
To get a return on investment, that might be the same thing, make money.
Yeah, okay, maybe you're all saying the same thing. So yeah, their job is to fund companies and give a return. Like, that's their job. There's no moral implication in that. They're an amplifier. They're gonna take an entrepreneur or a company and they're gonna amplify what that entrepreneur wants to do. So like, you can't morally measure them because they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do. The problem, I believe, is in the entrepreneur or the people creating businesses. So I actually, in preparation for today, again, I like this concept because I did feel very betrayed as I was building that business. So I've been, again, you can imagine, I've been musing over this. So I presented this to about 100 business strategy students a week ago, the same concept, and it was fascinating. So there were, in the group, again, I don't know, 60 to 100 of these folks, there were only 2 women in the group, and there were lots of men in this group. And the men basically were like, yeah, I get it, and they had questions. There's like 4 or 5 of the guys asked questions, but pretty much were like, yeah, I just want to make money. Like, I hear what you're saying, And that sounds great. But if we kind of circle back, my core premise is we as humans need to go help and raise the level of others. Like that is why we exist. One, and it's actually secondary, because if we do that to us, we will naturally improve. So the guys in the class kind of struggled with this concept. The two women in the class asked me very challenging, interesting questions. The first one said, okay, I hear what you're saying, yet we should go help other people, and we should build businesses that are philanthropic, or we should build businesses that, like Henry Ford, solve foundational human problems. But she said, but what about like Maslow's hierarchy? So you're saying, like, how do we, like, that sounds great. And she was actually kind of like, great, Dave, you've made lots of money. It's very convenient for you to, sit up on your roost and tell us, don't worry about money. And so how do you guys, just out of curiosity, how do you reconcile that? Because I was like, that's a fair criticism. It's easy for me to have been successful, having made lots of money. I'm sure in my mind I've justified wealth, and it's not a betrayal, right? We're all very good at arguing why we're great. So how do you reconcile that?
I guess for me, if it's a fundamental need, it's going to draw people a lot more easily because people are looking for an answer to those things. And so as long as the business is well run and like actually has the infrastructure to actually carry out the need, a lot of people will find it interesting.
It's kind of what one of the other women said. She said, let me remember how she said this. It was fascinating. I'm going to come at it from a different point of view. She basically said, my incentives are it's not what she said, but I do want to come back to it. She said, my incentives are wrong, and she used an example. Because I basically said, you should all, business people, go learn humanities also. Because then you have the business capability, and you can learn some of the these foundational human problems. And she's like, sounds great, but society does not incentivize me to do that. Society actually tells me to take as few classes as I can to get a 4.0, so I can go and get a great job, and I can go kind of get on, I can go make wealth, and I can have a family, and I can travel, and I can get a boat, and I can have, vacations to, Paris. Like, she's like, society is telling me not to do what you're telling me to do, which I think is actually true. So both of these women really they basically said, yep, sounds great, Dave, probably agree with you, but you're being naive. Like, it actually doesn't work. And then she came back, though, and said something similar a little bit to what you said. She said, however, maybe they're not mutually exclusive. Maybe I can build solutions to problems and also make wealth. And that's my hypothesis. That we need to create, our motivation first needs to help raise the standards of everybody around us, and wealth is a byproduct if you do it successfully, versus choosing to just pursue wealth. 2 questions.
I guess circling back again then, like assuming humanities majors are able to understand the human condition, could it be said that just better equips them to manipulate other humans into, like, isn't that, again, this is not in any way, shape, or form directed towards you, but
I like where you're going.
the general idea of business seems to be something circling around that, which is that, like, how can we manipulate the consumer to, like, serve this other end? Like, how do you genuinely make the consumer, as like Immanuel Kant talks about, like the person the end in business? Can it ever be the genuine, like,
Well, I think Henry Ford did it. There's no question. I think I maybe accidentally did it in COVID, right? So the answer is yes. But if you put business, there's basically 3 groups that are involved in business. You have the problem solver, you have the business expert, and then you have the tool expert, the technology expert. You combine those 3, and if it's in the right order, it's kind of magic. But if you let the business person lead, then you end up building tools for the sake of tools. So if you go to the venture community, there's been billions of dollars raised in just Utah in the last 10 years. Literally billions and billions of dollars. And what we're building, not entirely, but to a large degree, is a tool for the sake of a tool. Because the business guy's like, well, how can I go graduate? I can start a company, I can raise some money, I can make my $1 million, I can go get, buy my boat, get my 3-wheeler or 4-wheeler, I'm super old. And so if the problem is we have the wrong people building companies. We have the wrong people at the lead. Now, here's a crazy stat. Is it all wrong right now in society? Because I know many of you are like, it's a betrayal of like truly doing what we should do. 1/3 of the Fortune 500 CEOs, 1/3 have humanities backgrounds, degrees. 1/3 of the Fortune 500 CEOs have degrees in humanities. That's crazy. Let me read. I actually printed up some because I think you guys will be shocked. Michael Eisner, the former CEO of Disney, humanities degree, English lit. Howard Schultz, Starbucks CEO, comms. Again, I'll just read some of these quickly. Andrea Jung, Avon CEO. Richard Plepper, HBO CEO. Carly Fiorina, she actually, the former was HBO CEO, she's the HP CEO. We have some that you'll know, Jack Ma, Alibaba's chairman, humanities degree. Steve Ells, CEO of Chipotle, humanities degree. It's Oprah Winfrey, communications. Who else? Oh, and the obvious one, Steve Jobs, studied humanities. So when humanities individuals engage in this problem solving, crazy stuff happens. Like foundational human improvement happens. Like we can actually raise the level of people around us versus deferring back and allowing kind of business people to go do this. And the problem, I'm going to be a little critical of humanities, oftentimes we get stuck in the rut of appreciation over application. Humanities often is like, look, this is pure. This is, I'm going to appreciate, the Japanese language or I speak Hebrew, the Hebrew language. Like, no, like I think that's selfish. If we just do humanities for the sake of appreciation, it's very, I think it's a selfish thing. I think it's our responsibility to serve people around us and take this experience and knowledge and go try and solve some of the world's biggest problems. So the reason we're stuck in a drought of innovation is because people in humanities aren't getting as active in some of the more, historically larger businesses that have impacted society, I think largely better, are being led by people with degrees in humanities. But the next generation of innovation is not. And it's because of these concerns you guys like, how do I get involved? You have a question?
So this question might be a little dumb, but why is innovation so important?
And so yes, so the innovation is important because it's innovation that leads us into improving society through like stepwise improvements versus kind of just changing the deck chair so it's kind of we're in the same place. So innovation is how we improve our lives.
You hinted at this at the beginning, but if we look at some of these big companies, right? So Microsoft, Facebook, Meta, Amazon, we have these, you were saying that these monopolies are sort of stifling things. A lot of the problems.
No, that's what the economist says.
That's what the economist says.
I actually don't agree with it. It's yes, and.
And so, but it's the competition and the divergent thinking and these kinds of things. Many of these are solving this kind of connectivity problem that you've been getting at. Humans, we want to make it easier to connect with other humans. Some of them are doing these kinds of things, like about access and whatnot. In a sense, are there better ways? Are you kind of thinking, can we think of better ways to do that? Is that what you're?
Yeah, I think you can. And I actually think you look at I hate Meta, not because I hate social media, which I do, but it does solve a foundational problem. But he didn't invent that; he stole that. right? And then you think about like Instagram. Did he invent that? No, he bought that. So now he's trying to do, like, I think it's very difficult for organizations to both innovate and operate. And so oftentimes you have to have different people. I think someone like Elon Musk is maybe the greatest entrepreneur that Western society has ever seen, because he's both. He's both a business person and he is a problem solver. Like, he's just a weird dude, but I think he's brilliant.
So what kind of barriers to entry are there for humanities students to become involved in the problem-solving case? I mean, you look at
Yeah.
applications, your company, humanities degree from BYU. What are the barriers that the students need to overcome to get there?
You just have to have confidence. You just have to act as if you belong. Because there is you guys are familiar with the idea of an imposter syndrome, where you never feel like you belong. Well, humanities folks, we always feel like we have like an imposter syndrome coming into a business environment. Just act like you're the boss. Like, when I went into investment banking, think about that gap. That's kind of what you guys are asking. Just do it. Like, my buddy was like, Dave, what are you gonna do? I'm like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, who makes the most money? And he's like, well, bankers do. I'm like, well, what, like Zion's Bank? He's like, no, investment bank. I'm like, what's that? But you have the ability to learn things very quickly. You have the ability to adapt, and you just jump in and you just figure stuff out. And you have that ability. Like, you're literally trained to learn things and solve these kind of problems. So like, just act like you belong, because guess what? You actually do. In fact, society needs you to come and lead out and go do the uncomfortable things. So look, if you're a professor in this room, encourage your students to go take a business class. I went and got a minor in business because I'm like, I don't even know what investment banking is. So like, when I realized, I'm like, crap, I don't know what debits and credits are. This is like, but it's just another language. Or go study, get a minor in computer science or in computer engineering or something. Like, go expose yourself to the new vocabulary, because that's all these other industries are, is it's just a different vocabulary. So like, you 100% belong in those areas. There was a question over here, and I think I'm about out of time. No question? Yeah.
As an entrepreneur, like if you had to start another company, where would you?
I started another one. I'm starting an electric car company.
Okay.
Because I think there's a problem. I'm not gonna tell you what it is.
Would you start with the most foundational problem?
Yes.
And then just.
And here's the deal, you adapt. Any company that starts, what they end up delivering should be constantly like changing and just basically getting feedback from, like, the worst entrepreneurs are the ones who have a great idea. The best entrepreneurs have a starting idea, and then they learn and they talk to people, like, and they find out what problems people are running into. Like, they never land where they start. We have time for maybe one or two questions, that's it.
So you talked about how people, like humanities majors a lot tend to like appreciate something instead
Yes.
of like applying it.
Yes.
But to me, I think I think application is very important, but I also think appreciation is
It's
very
not
valuable.
an or.
Right. So
You
I
should
was-
also appreciate.
My question is, how do we take that and use it as a strength in like the business world or?
If you appreciate something, you have passion. Like, it's clear, like, I have opinions here. Like, your passion for like, I still read an insane amount of like philosophy because I love it. Like, that passion will come through and people will follow you. Like, you have the ability, again, a third of the Fortune 500 CEOs have humanities degrees, and I think it's because of that passion, that love of what you learn. So, by the way, it's not, I've picked a microcosm. Some of the greatest football coaches in the world have humanities backgrounds. A guy named Mike Leach, the weirdest dude, but he is like so diverse. Like people want the passion that you guys have for things that are beautiful. Like, I think, like, what you are studying right now is absolutely stunning. It's beautiful. Like, you should love what you're doing. I'm not saying don't change what you're doing. Like, I love it, but take that and help society through innovation. I think that's what I'm saying. And again, like, a couple of things. Quit thinking of STEM or business as a competition. Like, embrace it. Like, I sit on the board of Utah Tech, and the humanities, like, when we changed the name from Dixie State, the dean of the humanities department was about to lose his mind. He's like, so am I gone? I'm like, no. Like, he actually started a center for understanding kind of human technology interaction. Like, all of a sudden, like, we're teaching Python in all of the humanities classes because you need to use Python, which is a programming language, to understand how to run analysis of data or interpret surveys and things like that. So like, we're now integrating these things versus the traditional silos that schools have. So like there's so many ways you guys are gonna solve problems. I really don't know what they are. Like, by the way, I am no smarter than any of you. I just basically was like, well, I want to go to law school, and I don't think I want to teach yet. So like, what else am I going to do? I'm like, well, who makes money? So I actually went down, I think, the wrong path, and I had to kind of discover like, oh, I need to do this not for making money. I need to do this to help people, and then maybe I make money, maybe I don't. So again, it's easy for me to be here to give that. So I do get the irony or the contradiction of what I'm saying. I'm saying try and do it better than I did.
I'm just going to pitch something really quick. The College of Humanities has a digital humanities and technology minor in which we teach classes from humanities and all on programming,
That's
Python,
brilliant.
and other things. So if you want to, or building web designs, CSS, HTML, so we have a program in college being taught by humanities people, the humanities students to do these sorts of things.
You should take that class. Like, if you're not, you're dumb. Like, you see, you have, and by the way, in an institution like this, you have an opportunity to kind of explore all of these things. Take advantage of it. I took a long time. I think he shared a few of my minors. BYU actually kicked me out because I had like 200 and some odd credits, 240, and they're like, oh, it's a church-sponsored school. They're subsidizing you. Go away. But the principle is, like, embrace this time, like, learn things that don't make sense. Take classes that you're like, I would never do that, but that's interesting. And you have that diversity of thought. The more you do that, you'll think divergently, and that divergent or that disruptive thinking allows you to understand things in different ways than anybody else in the world thinks. So just, I think we're out of time, aren't we? Yeah. So the only thing I'd say is like, do you have the ability versus the business people to come and innovate and make a big difference in a lot of people's lives? So, like, that's it. Please do that.